It's a Saturday, no, yes, a Saturday night. And what have we got here? Well, we have got, sorry about the jiggling, we have got what I think is a really good looking guitar. And I'm not typically a fan of the relics. But this thing's done in a way that I just like. And it's a combination of things that I also like, which kind of gets me. So first of all, what have we got? We've got made in Japan's Squier Silver series neck for sure. Possibly, probably the body that came with it. Everything after that is different. So we've got a Wilkinson 2-point tremolo with a Brenner piezo bridge fitted with kind of, I don't know how this works, pre-compensated, already compensated. Yeah, it's kind of like a, just do that or that on these little screws. Anyway, so it's a bit like a wraparound bridge with its pre-compensation, and you just pull it one side or the other to kind of get the angle right. It's got Fender noiseless pickups in it, which I like, bizarrely. This one, the two different kinds, this one's got Fender on it and silver, and this one's gold and gold. So I don't quite know which series generation they are, but I've got some on one of mine and I like them. We've got a 5-way switch. We've got a, I'm not sure what that is anymore. That could have been the Gilmore flip. We've got a rattly jack socket, and in the side of this beastie we've got the piezo output, which is not doing anything, but it's also rattling. And then we've got a hole at the back that used to house the preamp, or a preamp for the piezo pickup thing. And so we've got the back end of this, which is equally kind of nicely battered. I mean, yes, it's clearly deliberate, but I think it's done, I just like it. I would happily play this. Then we get onto what's really the heart of this thing, which is a great big fat neck with plenty of wear, genuine wear on it, including all the original chin holes. And we've got these Spurzal locking chins here, which add a touch of class to the whole deal. But this thing just feels great, and with the noiseless pickups on it, the Fender noiseless pickups, I think it sounds fantastic too. Obviously, it's had all manner of mashings and gnashings going on in here, which is quite funny. But you know what? It together as a single thing, this is a nice package. I really like it. And so you come to the neck, and it's a big, you know, it's a nice Japanese style rosewood neck with fairly fine frets on it. With a little plastic kind of sheath around the truss rod, just a hole. These are staggered Spurzals, so they do away with the need, although I kind of said to John myself that I find these are a little bit, you know, and I have to make sure that when we change the nut that this is tilting backwards on those slots so that we get the actual correct, or get the most out of the pivot point at the front of the nut. Easy to overlook. It's got a good first fret action currently set on it. But of course that's going to change. Why are we refretting this? Well, because for John, the frets are now just so low that his fingers skip over the top of them when bending. So there isn't enough height when you're bending, pressing the string down. There's not enough height to press down and get your fingers sort of, or not press down, sorry, for your finger to drop below the string onto the wood and push. And that's for me what sometimes is a deciding factor for when it's time to refret, is if you start finding it difficult to bend because of that. So what am I going to do with this? Well, this is going to be a refret. We've got Dunlop 6150 wire, which is pretty much what, well, sorry, put it another way. John specified Dunlop 6150, and I've got the all partsy type equivalent. Let's have a look. John Partscaster, here we are. And for those of you who had any interest in these things at all, I've just committed a heresy. Look, I've gone and fitted an adjustable tusk nut to my Taylor baby. Oh no, I've obscured the name with a adjustable tusk nut hex key. But I wanted to see whether I could tell the difference. Now, with a bit of rubbish playing, I've done a couple of sound samples, so I can try and see if anyone can genuinely tell the difference. And of course, because I'm not playing the same thing very well, I'm trying to play the same thing, but not very well, etc., etc. There's all manner of reasons why each sound sample could be different, so I apologise for that in advance. But the good thing about it is we'll let you see. At some point, I'll try and let you hear what you see if you can hear a difference between the two. And the reason I was prompted to do that was because somebody was commenting on the, well, surely, you know, the posts that begin, surely adjustable nut on 2 feet couldn't possibly, and you go, well, honestly, I haven't had a problem so far, so you know, why would I be too concerned? Now, what I am concerned about is I appear to have immediately lost my winder. That's not right. There's not many places it could actually hide. It's not here. It's not there. It's not there. Okay. String winder. Why is it on the? Why is it on that thing? I don't know. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I am going to remove the strings first step. We're going to get straight into the refret process because, yeah, I'm going to take the nut out too. There's a lot of graphite and stuff in the knot, in the slots here. So I think it's going to benefit from a replacement. And the aim of this, I'm going to make it an adjustable one. To heck with the critics. No, there aren't any serious critics, but I'm going to make it an adjustable one. And the reason for that is so that we can get a perfect first fret action for this guitar without any without the slots being compromised in any way. And that's it's fine to cut the slots on a Tusk nutted guitar, absolutely no problem at all. But it's that extra little bit better if you can get it working without the slots having been chomped with a file. And it's, you know, if you imagine that Tusk was 100% good, Tusk, well, let's say Tusk with unfiled nut slots is 100% good. That's a bit big. Then I reckon we could say Tusk with slightly filed nut slots is 95% good. It's pretty good. It's far better than not doing it, but I like to go for that extra little bit of straight from the factory, as smooth as it gets. You know, why introduce any friction back into the train of things when you're going to such an extent to get rid of it? That's my mantra, has always been that. Right, those strings over there for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the neck right off. There's no need for this to be on the guitar right at this point. So get me the right bit. I think this anodized aluminium thing is bugging me, and I've got 2 others that I might as well try and see if they work better. It's not that rocket to science, is it? There you go, that's simple, that works. So long aluminium alloy. Well, let's go 1D direction. So this isn't going to have the not going to have the what do you call that thing, piezo, working at this point in time. It's kind of going to stay as a whole, but the idea is let's just concentrate on making this play. You can see this has been refinished as well, so it's like, you know, it's good fun. It's been stripped back of all its original finish probably, and then painted over with something much more rippable, offable, and then scraped back on the road, dragged down the garden kind of thing. But I just think it's great. I really like the way it looks personally. Right, so well, let us put this out of the way somewhere safe. Let's leave it up here. I would normally have some ropes to hang it from, but okay. So with this, we're going to need to take the tuners off, and we're going to need to take the nut out as well. Oh, these don't fit, different size. Very well. Careful use of the, whatchamacallit, adjustable spinner. So 2 of John's 3 guitars are already done. Second one I did this afternoon, or should say. And what I want to do is make sure these are in the correct order, because I think they're all, I think it's just 2 different sizes, but no, actually, you know what, there's 3 groups of 2 is what there is. So just as long as I know that's the case, I'll be all right. But for the time being, I'll take them off. I just want them out of the way while I'm doing the things like the fretting and sanding out the frets and whatever. So these come out on little locator lugs, which are very cool and have to be hand done once you upgrade to them, which is quite fun. Yeah, so there are some guitars that you get that are very much at least the sum of their parts, if not more, and I think this is one of them. It has a fab feel to it. Now, of course, there's a risk, and I always kind of remind myself that the risk is, you know, when you refret a guitar, you can make it feel quite different. Well, the act of refretting it makes it feel quite different. So you have to be very aware of that from, you know, for the customer's perspective. Now, these are worn frets, and they're too low for John's purposes right now, so that's why we're refretting. Now, the 6150 is what he specified, but what neither of us really know is what that actually feels like in practice. And it's not criticism, it's just to say that in real life we don't know until we get our hands on it and it's refretted, and then, oh, I don't know, that feels very different from this old vintagey style thing that I had before. So, like I say, we don't know. Now, this is backbowed at the moment, which is not what we want. Now, when I played this, I noticed that it had it was completely lacking relief. So, let's have a look and see if there's any kind of adjustment, or even what size it is. It's not the whatchamacallit size. Metric 4 mils, and might be a 5, yeah, okay. So it's done up quite tight, just judging by the feel of it. Slacking it off, and then we're flat. Great, not too hard. Now this nut is the original one, and it was fitted very well, and we may find it difficult to remove that. So we have to look at the situation, right? So let's get the replacement that I ordered. And I think that a good way of tackling these things is to kind of think of where we're at, right? It's a permanent change, okay? Number one, I mean, as in, that's nicely fitted. If we take that out, and especially if we have to sort of cut it out a little bit destructively, then it's a change. Here we have the replacement, which is, according to this, almost spot on the exact measurements. It's about a third of a millimetre, half at most wider, which is not a great deal in real terms. So we have to consider removing this. We've got the replacement. What we don't know about this is whether the slot in this was curved or straight. Now, if it's curved, let us see, let us pray. And the percussion bass, that's not going to be no help, is it? Squier jazz bass. Okay. Well, if it is curved, then we'll have to innovate and make it curved, right? Make it work. And it's not that difficult to do, to cut or ground a radius onto here. So before we start, let's see what it's telling us the radius is. 7.25, good old vintage thing. Now that's quite good, because this thing I've got down here, which will help me with a bit of sticky tape here and there, help me to cut a 7.25 curve, which is this here. It's not the best way to check it, but that's a 7.25 curve. This will allow me to sand this to a 7.25 curve if I so need to do. It's a great little tool. It's handier than most things that a friend of Reloved sent me, a part of something he was developing. I don't know how, I haven't been in touch recently, so I don't know how well he's got on with it, but it was a good start of sort of putting curves on nut bases, but also for sanding the ends as well. Okay, so like I said, it's sort of one way really. We commit to it, we're done. If you look at the condition of this neck, it's lost most of its finish down the edge here. We're kind of down to plain wood, and of course we're through the finish and into kind of muddying the wood with sweat, which is a common thing. On this it looks pretty good and it gives it the mojo feel. On that fingerboard, on the GS2 that I'm also refretting, it's not such a pleasant thing. It looks a bit mucky, to be honest. So the question is, as we line up to do things, is are we going to remove this? Well, we need to, because whatever happens, the height of these slots won't be right when we've got new frets in. So there's no way that's going to be right. And so we're either going to have to cut them more, in which case I doubt it is tusk from the olden days. Well, I know it won't be tusk from the old Squier Japan days. So we're going to end up cutting it into something like micarta or whatever the original stuff was that they used for their nuts. I think it was micarta. So I think we're going to accept that this is going, and the next question that comes out of that is, all right, how do we help it on its way? What sort of process do we look to? And what I'm looking for is the right drill bit, of which there are millions, but never the one you actually want. Take a little one out of there, that'll do. So I'm thinking of making a very small drill hole or impression in the side of the nut, and that's so I can get a little tapping motion at it without things jumping out. Now, whether or not that will actually help it out, or whether we're going to have to cut it out, is anyone's guess. So let's try, and I'm doing my snooker version here. Okay, so we have a little drilled notch in there, and then the question would be, can we, just with that notch alone, can we gently tap this or drive this or encourage this to come out? For which I could use anything really, but I was sort of thinking about a little metal punch, which is now taken off somewhere else. Where have they gone? No sign, no show. Okay, they've gone for a bit of a walk. Is that one? One, but it's not a very fine one. Oh no, maybe. So a little punch there. Do we get a locator there? Do we get a bite? Get a little bit of bite. It's not very scientific, this bit now. I'm just going to hold it, support it, and see if it wants to move at all. Okay, well, that's encouraging. It's gone for a slide, which I'm much happier with. Okay, so it is micarta, as imagined, and it's on a curved base, which is cool. So we will modify this one to be a curved base as well. Now, the one thing about these nuts is you can get, sometimes when you get to the right size, what you don't have control over is the radius on here, and I may have to cut that, and that loses my perfect, oh well, I wanted to do my utmost to not cut into the slots. So that's very difficult to ascertain. You know, I could look at that and say, if I go from the bottom of the slots, that could be 7.25 to my eyes. It's very hard to prove or disprove. It's very, very close. Or it could be slightly flatter, in which case it could be a more general 9.5. Again, how you really tell this just with the naked eye is anybody's guess. I would predict that for common usage, this is probably more like, I'm guessing at 9.5, but I'm imagining it could equally be. Can't judge by the clearance on top because that's just the top of the nut. So there we go, so 9.5. 9.5 actually is a little bit too flat for the top of this nut, so it may well be 7.25. We know this is 7.25, and we know that we're going to need to sand this to 7.25, and here is our device to do it. There's a reverse one on that side, but I will use this one in a minute. So first thing we've got to do is get this down to thickness. So we measure the original nut and we get a reading at the slot of 306, just reset it, try again, 308, 309, so it's just over 3. This one was probably coming at 3.6, I think it was, or maybe 3.3, 3.2. Okay, so they're very close already. So this one needs just the very finest amount of flat sanding to make it fit. Now, the beauty of that one, factory made one, is it fits like a glove. This one is going to be perhaps a little bit harder to tailor to the exact same dimensions, just because we're doing it with handheld tools and a certain amount of sanding and sort of guesswork, really. And we try it, and there we go. Well, it wants to fit in, but it's not quite there yet. So I'll go back to this one. Finest grades possible, really. We're not in a rush. We don't want to overcut it. I'd rather ease it in than get it wrong. I'm taking it from the flat front of the nut. See, it's kind of waiting to go in there, but it's a little bit out at the base end. So a slowish process to get the nut right, but once we get it right and we get it sort of in an adjustable mode, then we have a nice freedom to set it to whatever height we want. Come the time we've finished the refret and the fret level and the polish out, and we've got our new frets ready to go, then this will work to those instead of, you know, having to wait and then cut it when the new frets are fitted. We're kind of very close. Now I tend not to do the back side because it tends to be easier to keep one side flat, I find, than trying to cope with two sides at once. And there's no reason at all why we should swap sides in this case. There are some cases where I do, for example with the adjustable Gibson style one. I often go front and back when sanding that because it has to fit in a slot and it has to be balanced around the central screw. We haven't put the screw in yet. That's my next bit. And so as a result, we don't have any screw to even up and end up with it in the center of the mass of the nut. So just a little tiny nerdy considerations. Now this refret I'm going to do, it's going to be 7.25. I'm going to bend the wire on my wire bending thing, and I'm going to aim to do it with, it's very nearly in this, I'm going to aim to do it with wood glue, not super glue, and I'm going to leave the condition of the neck as much as it's possibly as it is currently like. It's not a very good sentence, but you know what I mean. As leave it as untouched as possible. All I really most care about is getting the, this won't sit flat by the way because it's not curved, but it feels nice at this point. What I most care about is getting the place where the frets sit to be perfectly, what's the word, smooth. So when I take the frets out, I may just clean little strips along here like this, as opposed to, I don't think I'll do an overall one. It's in good condition, it's very clean. So I'll just clean that way, make sure I've got a good start point for getting the frets in. So now I need to get my radius out of this. There's a couple of things you can do. I think one of them is you can, if you're me, you can speed things up a bit by putting the original thing on it. I'm not even sure that's a perfectly cut radius anyway. Looks a little bit hamster fisted, but we can start with this and we can place it on there and we can basically draw a little bit of radius-y type thing going on there, about the same position each side. And if we wanted to, we could just lock a thing in the vise and just bring a Dremel up to that. We'll hold the Dremel and just do some sanding. It's kind of easier to do that than it is to, can be easier to do that than it is to put it on that block. But once we get it close, then we can put it on that little block. And since we'll be working to the outside of the line, and since we'll be doing an adjustable nut, then I'm not too precious about getting this wrong. So I'm going to put this against here and just offer this up. Okay, not perfect, but it'll just speed things up so that when I put it on this, and it probably would work just like that now, but I'm not going to expect it to do the job. I'm going to kit up this little bed, 7.25 bed with some sandpaper, and I'm going to complete it by scraping it along there. What grade should we use? I think we need 120 for this. Maybe like that. Something like that. Bit of the old double-sided. Remember, we're on the last roll of this. Note to self. I think for this bit here, no, I'll leave that on because we do need to take a tiny bit off the length overall, so that would be handy having this end straightening thing. So, oops, that's not easy to get in there. Left with this stuff is kind of mucky but very useful too. It always, the glue part somehow miraculously remains in a web form, so you can always pull it off as a piece, as a single webbed piece. It's amazing in that respect. Very handy. Idiot! Shit, that's not what I meant to do. So damped. Look at that. Almost caught out there. Very sticky too, by the way. Did I tell you? Okay, that will do. Just got away with that. So my aim here will be to hold this, and not the easiest thing. Now, the person who came up with this design did, in fact, make me a thing to hold the nut in place. For some reason, I didn't find it a thing for me very well, so I haven't kind of used that, so I've ended up just using my fingers. But actually that's pretty good going for a little bit more on that end. I'm quite impressed with how it performs in the sort of handheld bootlaces, no, braces, what is it? Oh, wait a minute. Bootstraps type of approach. So there we have a radio switch. Is pretty well close to that. You wouldn't know the difference. Now it's not really critical because actually ultimately I'm not going to end up, probably not going to end up standing the thing exactly on it, and judging by this we probably need it to be generally smaller than that. But the difficulty is knowing how much smaller, because when the time comes I want to be able to raise it up and put it down, and I want to start with the strings touching the new frets. So we don't really know the precision bit of that till later, so let's put it off to one side and call that bit sort of part done. But we know what we're doing with it, we know where we're going, and we know just what to do. Remember that was a song. Okay, so now we're in the, I don't know what's happening with batteries and memories. I charged everything. Oh, do you know what? I've done this again. I'm so sorry. I have not done the correct microphone thing. I've just got going. I am such a lousy cameraman. Right, tomorrow, next defretting, refretting, I'm going to promise use the... Jesus, oh, that hurt. You ever wish you didn't have any thumbnail at all because you just jammed it slap bang into the door? Well, that's me. That's me, that is. That's me in the door frame. Losing my thumbnail. Okay, so this is me doing my special pull. Now, I have developed this strange technique after years of damaging the edge of the fingerboard trying to raise frets up. Now this way leaves, sometimes there's a tiny little shine when you do it like that just did, but apart from that it doesn't really do any damage, and that shine kind of rubs off with the fingers. So it's about getting the edge of the the edge of the blade just under the edge of the fret. So the very thin part of the blade, and of course it's got to be that thin to get anywhere under there. And when I get it under there, I can then twist the blade a little bit and it starts to lift the fret. So that's the aim of the game. And I've sort of developed doing this because it's easier to limit the amount of damage. If you were to use one of these, no matter how sharp and good they are, if you use one of these fret puller files on the end here, what you get is you get a crushing that happens because you can't get a bite to begin with. You have to press down disproportionately, inordinately hard to get the fret out, and to get the fret to bite, or to get a bite on the corner of the fret. And my experience has become that doing this is a much better way of starting that lifting the fret, and then you can come in with these devices and sort of nibble your way along as best you can. Okay, but getting them a lift at the end is much better. Now there's a little bit of shine there, but there's no deformation of the wood, and a quick going over with handheld sandpaper will clear all that up, which I'll do anyway, probably just to clear up the crusty bits on the sides of the fret slot, which is always a good thing to do. So here they come nicely. Now the thing what I need to know just quickly, the main thing in this fret replacement is often the size of the tang or the width of the tang. So I'm going to just check it here. Appears to be anything between the smallest showing 60 there. Come on, 61, 59, 61. So wherever I go, it's about 61. If I look at the fret wire, do a similar test. It's actually smaller. That's interesting. Oh well, no, it's in some places it says it's smaller. Yeah, it's about 55. So it's very, very similar. So we'll probably have a bit of glue just for safekeeping. But we won't need any extra what's the word? Tang nipping games going on. Chop your finger with the blade. So yeah, a little bit of crushing there, that's all it is. It puts a little shine on the wood. But as I say, it is far infinitely preferable to the bites that the tools would give. Now you can sort of reduce the amount of twist you do on it to whatever the blade will tolerate to lift the fret. So I'm trying to do it with as little twist as possible. It's still, it works best with a little twist because you're sort of dialing it out rather than trying to pull directly on the blade, thin metal of the blade. So it's a sort of turning motion. Now with this, you sometimes get a little bit of chip out. There are lots of, I think, sometimes myths and black magic stories about foolproof ways of preventing chip out, and in my time I've done it almost every way and found no foolproof way of removing frets without a little chip. If the fingerboard is flaky in that way, it's going to chip out whether you like it or not, frankly. The best you can hope for is to try and keep any chips either in place, tiny, if they're big ones, a tiny touch of glue to hold them in place, and then sort of sand over them to, you know, there's one threatening to come up there, a little tiny lifty bit, but frankly, if we can fret on top of it, and if it doesn't come up when I sand these back just gently to get rid of the crusty bits, then who knows. Now that one may have been me getting the bite on it without pulling it up first, but you know, the frets pull up chip out stuff just purely by purely by adhesion, you know, with finger glue, finger grease, pressure, a load of finger goo over the years, and before you know it, you've got a crusty composite stuck to the side of the fret, and it just wants to stay there basically. Sorry, you're a rubbish view, I apologise. Note to self, cut to overhead camera. Not least because the sound is still rubbish because I haven't plugged in my blasted radio mic thing. Honestly. So the tricky bit is getting the first, now that's a great piece of chip out wanting to come up here. I can see it, feel it, hear it. So I'm going to come in from this end. I'm going to try and get a bit of lifting going on here and see if I can track it down and make sure it doesn't come out. And we'll see what we're really dealing with. That was a fair sized, I could see it, it's a fair sized chunk that wanted to come up here, and it may, when we take another look, it may be flaking right on the edge, which could be the reason why it lifted there. Sometimes you just get unlucky and there'll be a piece ready to lift right at the edge, and there's nothing you can do about it. It just happens to be that's where the air gap is, or whatever the weakness is in the wood, and it's going to come out and you're going to have to deal with it. It can feel very daunting if you do some pulling and a considerable amount of stuff appears to come out. You know, you can feel very disheartened because it can start to look like a long appointment with some super glue and some rosewood powder. But the problem with doing that is that it's practically impossible to fix down chips that are sizable enough to want to fix down, or to fill little tear outs that you haven't got the missing bits for, which is quite common too. It's very difficult to do that without ending up with a blob sticking up proud of the surface. So if that's the case, then you find yourself compelled to do some surface work, you know. So the plan to do as little as possible on here can be thwarted by having to do repair work and then ending up with little puddles of dried super glue and rosewood, which look what they are, crusty blobs, right? So then you find yourself having to get the radius block out, and you end up doing what you didn't want to do, which is radius block, re-radiusing this. So it's one of the things you can't plan at the beginning. You can't know that this fingerboard is going to behave well enough for you to get this job done without needing to refinish to cover up places where it's given up the ghost and pulled up some flakes. So you can never know. You have to sort of respond on the go. I can see down to here there are sort of little skirts of rosewood trying to come up with this. Now, if you keep them all in place and you don't intend to sand too much anywhere else, what you can sort of plan to do is to, as I said at the beginning, sand only in a very thin strip here, and if you do that, you can pretty much prepare the frets how you want, or the surface for the frets to a condition that you feel confident about, and you can do it in a very thin strip, so you don't actually have to do the whole lot. Now that when you do the whole lot, it'll be then when the chips start to come out and reveal their true colours. I can see this trying to pull up some chips as I go along each one of these. There's a little one that's gone now from there. It's there, but it's too small to even replace. Most of the tang of the new fret will cover that, but it's I'm afraid it's what you get with a, I'd say, quite a dry fingerboard with a flaky grain. I'm just basically trying to keep it all pressed down as much whilst pulling it out, which is a sort of slight contradiction. There's another little bit. There was no way we'll get those little bits in. It's better to fill those with a bit of glue. But that then means we either leave it sort of proud and rough, or we extend our sanding. So I would be tempted to fret, then see what's extending, and then fill up to the edge of the fret, and then scrape back with a knife and do final cleanups that way. So, because if you start doing them now before you fret, what will happen is the mixture, that your repair mixture, will end up going into the slots anyway, and you'll have to spend a lot of time clearing them. So it's better to not to complicate that at this point, and just get straight on and prepare for the refret. And keeping in mind that you may see a lot less than you think by the time you finish the refret. Now I'm going to dig in my tools department, because in here somewhere are a couple of tools, handmade tools, that I've used a few times before. Probably quite old now, but this is a thing I've made with a bent jumbo fret, radiused, with tang cut off. And so what it becomes, oh God, that is the worst camera I've ever done. I'm so sorry, that's just shite. What you can do with this nice little tool is you can just go down here like this, and you can just sand off the crunchy stuff. Now hopefully, if you keep it in a straight line, it'd be nice. I probably could make myself a little device that only allowed this to move along that surface there. But if I just do that, that's hardly noticeable, and I can fret over the top of that. The tang of the new frets will come close to the, probably cover all of that little bit of sanding there, and that way we've kind of pushed down any little bits of the flaky finish that want to come up. So it's a neat little device, this, and I'm just sort of running it. It's not, I think it's probably closer to a 9.5 radius that I've got here, but it's better than a flat one. It doesn't have to be exactly 7.25. I'm sort of working it like that, but it's I can feel the differences, complete difference between the ones I've done and the ones I've yet to do. And the trick, I guess, is just to keep rolling it across the narrowest possible strip covering the fret slot. I'm kind of bending it over. No, it's going to roll the edge a tiny bit, but nothing too bad. So let's zoom out, give you some respect of being able to see what I'm doing. Well, what I haven't done yet as well is clean the slots, but with this I'm going to be fretting right metal to the wood edge, and we're going to use the beveling block to give this a really razor sharp kind of beveled finish. And the reason we can do that is partly because it's already the poly is already pretty much worn from the edge of the fingerboard in either relic or genuine wear, so we don't have that sort of preciousness that you will get with some guitars that you're refretting. For example, if this was a brand new Fender and somebody just wanted different frets, like, I don't know, stainless or something, then we've got all this luscious thick poly or something on the side here. In that case, we really want to try and avoid, even though we've been asked to refret, we want to try and avoid running the beveling file down the edge there, because that's hungry and takes away quite a lot of, or likely to take away quite a lot of new finish in order to get, and it does anyway. There's no way you can get a razor sharp beveled finish without cutting into the finish on the side. It's just impossible. It's a brute force mechanical process, and it's going to cut into the finish. Your job is to minimize how much it does it, and of course you stop at the point that you've got the flush frets and the point of view that you've got the flush frets or beveled flush is when actually it starts to cut into the finish, because there's no more fret to cut into to protect the finish. So you've got to be alert to when that is, but the truth is you can't prevent it, because it's going to go across. Before you call a halt to your beveling process, it's already going to be taking a few microns of finish with it. So you just have to be prepared for that. And if it's a lot, you have to be prepared to touch it up with some sort of poly finish and figure out how you're going to clean that repair area and sand it out and so on. So it's a constant sort of working with contingency thinking all the time. It's a very, I find this a very meditative, calm sort of process. You feel all this crusty stuff going away. It's very nice to do. Somebody's finger grease, and I just sort of declog the paper every now and then. This would probably only be good for this one job, but I said that probably last time and then chucked it straight in the pot and came back to it 4 years later and did another one. So that's what I've got. I mean, the reason this is quite a good little tool is because I've got a jumbo, used to be a good little tool until it broke, is I had a jumbo fret as a start point. All I've got to do now is get a bit more material and put it on, because we do need to use it. So a bit of double-sided sticky stuff and something to cut it on. It's a bit big. Oops, there goes Trekkie number 9 over on its face. Luckily, I've still got to sand it to finish it. But so I'm going to get a very thin strip of this, not much at all. This lasts for quite a long time because I don't use much. Cut a little thin strip, cut it short there, and then the idea is we'll, sorry if you can see it, we'll take off the backing, we'll put it on this neat little detanged crown, like so. Start it from the outside inside, shall we? From the end there, something like that. Don't quite know what I was doing there, but it seemed to work. Cut it short there, and then I have got the, I suppose I've got the curve there, but it's not going to work. And it's a little bit tricky then, because you're working on a curve. You've got to try and cut it as thin as possible, following the curve of the fret. So it's going to bend the fret, this bit of fret wire, as it trims as much as possible. Not quite. The reason I'm going to trouble to trim it is we don't want the paper too much wider than the slot. We're trying to minimise the amount of sanding damage, if you like. So even if it bends the fret temporarily while we're cutting, it's better to just do that. So I'll cut this back too. Better to do that so we get a clean cut, so that the sanding surface stays only as wide as the fret we're using. That should be fine. There you go. Snip those off. Right. Sorry, Trekkie 9. You didn't come unglued or anything drastic, did you? No. Okay, so where were we? Oh yeah, here we are. So try and squeeze it on so it's as on as possible, and then get back into the job at hand. Oh boy, we're having some fun and games in our neighbourhood at the moment. Well, not neighbourhood, I suppose, in our village. This thing I've taken on the job of being a parish councillor, and it's really, really challenging, because my view is that a previous, this doesn't want to stick for some reason. This is not sticking. Might need a new, what might we need? We might need some of this special permanent duck carpet tape. Get this to stick. Well, it used to work pretty well. You can see we've got most of it done, but maybe I'm being a little bit heavy-handed or something. Yeah, so I sort of took the role of parish councillor because me and a couple of other people had believed that the process of planning new developments in our area was being mismanaged, or badly managed I should say, and that the village was heading towards a lot of unwanted development that nobody wanted, well, or the majority didn't want I should say, which it seemed to me, from what I'd understood about the whole process, that there's a kind of formal neighbourhood planning process that the village is entitled to go through to make a statement about the kind of limits to development that it feels is appropriate for the village. And it has to have a very strong, it has to have a strong evidenced argument for why the level that we might argue. So our village began with the local development plan stating that given this, that and the other, our village should look to housing level for the next additional housing development level for the next 12 years or whatever it is, or 14 years of, it gave us an indicative number of 20. And now that's not it's interesting in the language, it's indicative, it's not you must have, it's generally speaking, that's what the planning government recommendations, etc., that's what all the planning systems and bodies sort of think a village like yours should be able to accommodate that sort of, or should expect and accommodate that sort of growth, given it's this, that and the other type of village. So, you know, okay, it may not please local people. They may go, no, I don't want any further development, which is quite a common immediate response from a lot of people. You know, I don't like the way it's changing, you know, my country is no longer blah, blah. You know, everybody has a degree of unwillingness for change. You know, we came to a little village, we like it how it was, and any development feels like a move away from what we liked about it. But the truth is, we're expected to grow a little bit, and rather than just it being imposed by the county council, the neighbourhood planning process is supposed to be a means by which we can, put it simply, the village can have a shot at putting its priorities for development and its views on why this much and not that much. Basically, it's our chance to enshrine that in a document, and the document has legal weight, and it must be considered when planning decisions are made by the local county council. So, you know, although it's slightly labyrinthine and it's cumbersome and, you know, difficult to actually do in practice, I trust the motivational, I trust the principle behind it. You know, that's what the government says it's for, and I'll approach it with that goodwill and believe that that's what they mean. So, unfortunately, in my village, it's my take, it's my view that, and me and some others' view, that this hasn't been done very well, or it's been done, let's put it this way, against the general wishes. The development plan has been sort of increased to an unacceptable level, or to a level that's not acceptable to the majority of villagers. And despite that lack of support, the people who've put it together, for whatever interests of their own, have continued, for whatever reasoning they have behind it, but they've continued to push for that scale of development. And me and a couple of other people just took offence at that, thinking, basically, it's not what I call democracy. If the majority of the people don't want that scale of development, and if this document is supposed to be one that represents at least a majority consensus, it won't please everyone, and wheresoever any development falls will naturally ruin somebody's view, okay? But if that's a given, that it will always end up ruining somebody's view, then far better that when that bad news comes to Mr. and Mrs. whoever, then at least they know that the decision to put it there was one taken with wide consultation and was arrived at democratically, and that's what matters to me. And you know, quite obviously, I could just as easily as anybody be the unfortunate person who gets the new housing built right outside my kitchen window, right? I totally accept that. But this process has not been done democratically, and there's a lot of evidence to show that it hasn't been done democratically. And in addition, speaking of evidence, there's a distinct lack of evidence supporting the decisions that the previous people who made this plan came to. So we figured the only way to try and make a difference with this was to stand for parish council and get elected, which we did, and 3 of us from, you know, kind of representing a group that has a name, but it's just its only motivation is to make sure that this process is done fairly and democratically, which we believe it hasn't been. And so that's all, you know, it's the only manifesto we've got, really. But what we're finding is that those vested interests are very, very fighting quite dirty, and have done ever since we've challenged them in any way, shape or form. They don't like being challenged. They've had it their own way for too long. So it's turning out to be very, very difficult to do anything even constructive, and it's not a situation I at all like to be in. You know, if I'm contributing something, I want it to be able to make a difference. So for example, we've got to go to a meeting on Monday, and the elephant in the room every time we're at this meeting is basically our indictment of the current chair who was here. He was responsible, sort of legally and in practice, responsible for this previous overdevelopment proposal that he's sanctioned and overseen the creation of this plan, of this proposal. And the elephant in the room is that we keep going to these. I've only been to about 3 so far since I've become a councillor, but each meeting, the one thing that is not spoken of is that this plan that they put together has been independently rubbished by planning experts, and because the chair, who is criticised in these reports, is refusing to allow these reports to be discussed, far less published, and he's using his convenient casting vote to stop it every opportunity, so that it never gets past being the elephant in the room. So it's not a great situation to be in. So there's the thing. Anyway, but it's not like me to. It's not like me to say the right thing. Who the heck is that? That's Genesis. Yeah. I'm not a good politiker. I really don't like. I don't like doing things if I'm just literally impossible to make a difference. Just hate that deal. So we shall see whether I can kind of tolerate this, or whether there is no appetite at all for basically confronting this elephant that I think needs to be named and brought out, because none of our objections or none of what we're trying to do makes any sense while this thing remains unspoken largely, which is crazy. But of course, to state what we really think about the situation naturally will create a great deal of conflict, because those vested interests appear to be still doing their utmost to make the thing go the way they want, for whatever reasons they want it to go that way. Now, you know, keep saying that I don't really care what those reasons are, whether it's, you know, envelopes full of cash or just somebody's friend of a friend of a friend doing something for a friend. It's not really, I'm not even that bothered. What I care about is the fact that it wasn't and remains, it wasn't and isn't democratic. And that will continue to bother me. I don't care about the true motivations to other people. So my question is, can I productively do anything in challenging this, or, you know, is it really the case that those with agendas will prevail because nobody else can stomach continuing to strive for something that just, you know, resists being challenged. Very, very tricky, and I'm not a person who likes to, believe it or not, I'm not a person who likes to beat around the bush. You know, if there's something that has to be said, I want it to be said. Okay, well, I've done a little bit of sanding here, and I've done it to remove any kind of surface obstructions, and I think that's all the kind of sanding I want to do. I want to leave the general feel of the original board, but I do want to have just that little bit of clean up on the fretboard to make sure we get a good finishing when it gets done, when the fretting's done. So I think the next thing I will do, instead of whinging about local politics, I think I just want to say about local politics, by the way, is I think the thing that really depresses me most is just how bitter it has been, and it is bitter when people, first of all, have unclean agendas that aren't about community. I'm sorry, I'll say that, as you know, mine isn't about me. I've got no land, I've got no property, I've got nothing to gain from standing as a parish councillor. In fact, I've got everything to lose, really. So it's nothing about wherever this development goes. It's got nothing to do with it. In fact, you know, in standing against this plan, the plan had proposed a development that would have been out of my line of sight. And had I just knuckled under and gone, you know, shut my mouth and let them do it, I would have not suffered. I wouldn't have been at the effect of this development. It would have been built out of sight of me, and I could have rested easily that my view wouldn't be spoiled. So it's absolutely not. By challenging it, I'm risking it coming back and being in front of my window. So the one thing you can't say is that it's about me not wanting it in front of mine, because if that were the case, I've already been offered that, but I've challenged it, and I'm running the risk of it being once again outside of my back door. But so it is only about the principle, and it's just depressing for me. I find it depressing that vested interest and bitter bullying style communications become the norm. And it's not just village life, I guess it's most places. It's not that much different from the feeling of being in the corporate workspace that I remember. Pretty uncomfortable. Ultimately, it always gets quite bitter and nasty. But yeah, I mean, my idea, I'd love it to be able to be a bit more positive, frankly. You know, we live in a fantastic place, and wouldn't it be great to just all get along? And there's my idealistic naivety showing. Okay, enough of local politics. Let's look at the radius of this thing again, if I can remember where the thingy has gone. Here it is. And we want 7.25. And this is currently flatter than that. So we need to bend a bit more. So I don't know how well you'll be able to see this. It's pointing over there with this thing. Is there a bendinator over there on the wall somewhere? Oh, there it is, yeah. So I'm going to whiz across there, and I'm going to tighten up the... I've done this in such a bad place. This is the worst possible place I could have done this. I'm going to tighten this up to 9, what I hope will be 7.5. Give it a twirl. Check the radius. Tighten it up some more until we get there. Bit flat still. I've got to pull this out and do it somewhere else. It's just a stupid place. I can't reach the adjuster, rather foolishly. Okay, this is 7.25, I bet you. Or it may even be a bit tighter than that. Fractionally tighter than that. So, loosen it off a bit. Now to get this right, and I have to stretch this back out, make a mess of it. And then bend it back in. Come on. nearly coming around to meet its own tail. Do the next one as well. So there's me 7.25 radius scissors. Funny part about this wire is when you buy it in 1 metre strips, there's a first centimetre at either end of the coil, which for some reason is a bit flat and doesn't. So that's weird. That doesn't go. Maybe it's shorter and doesn't quite meet up. No, see that's slacked off a little bit. Can you believe? You can tell because there's a bigger gap than it should be. If it's the same radius, it will be almost touching. Like that, probably a bit closer, depending on the length, of course. That's good. That's good. I can live with that. Okay, so the fun part. Now the other ones I'm refretting, by the way, I'm not going to be able to get them done very quickly because, first of all, they need poly finishing. This one doesn't, so I can get a good. Now let me think. No, I'm going to have to cut this. One of the things I've discovered recently that annoys me is when I cut fret wire, I tend to get, if I'm not careful, I get a little mark, and I think it's from the edge there, so I have to cut it at a slightly angled thing, because that little mark then becomes something I have to fret level out, which is usually no problem at all. But it would be more than annoying if on the one occasion where I get a perfect refret that doesn't need any fret leveling, I'm still going to have to do it because I've got this little crimp from the cut point. So I'm trying like anything. Still put a little chip on there, you see. It kicks back. So I think I'm going to have to replace these things because it's not the best thing in the world. Now that's touching there. How do I stop this from touching? And that means I have to put it quite at an angle on the frets, which means quite a bit of wastage. So if I want to avoid that little mark, I have to cut it right there at a slant, which is bloody useless. And still kick back and put a crimp on there, or a chip, I should say. Never had this with the other ones. Right, there's my cutting. Let's have a look. What's going to get in the way of that? Can't be doing anything bad. It just can't be. And there's a mark there. Right, that maybe came from the other time. Excuse me, just sit on there for a minute, would you? Thank you. Yeah, not great. Also, these have started to pretty much wear away already. Any chip marks? No, I think I got away with it that time. I'm having to cut long, which is going to make the whole thing get a bit difficult. Got enough material in these 2 meters of wire. It only takes about 1 1/3 to do, so we've got no worries about surplus and running out. So this looks wider than the original wire for a start, but that's what John's spec was, so we go with that and we make it work. This is not sitting in. It's probably because it's got twists at the end of each cut at the moment, or it may have. It really is trying. I don't know how it's doing this, but it's trying like hell to put little nips in this, and it's not even touching up there, so I just don't get why that can be the case. I'm keeping that well away from the closing jaws. Oh, I see. I guess it still touches when it finally shuts down on it. Well, that would be a design of these things, which is not ideal. Well, another reason to spend another 80 quid or something on a decent spec set. I thought these were going to be good. These were made in the USA and sold by a very reputable British firm. So when this shuts down, there's almost no way, apart from putting a really big slant on it, it's about the only way I can avoid getting that little chip. And this just doesn't want to sit on there. Well, okay, we'll just go with the angle. What the hell? So let's put them in afterwards. I'm taking too long to fiddle with them. It hardly takes any touch at all to put that little mark on. I see why. It presses it in at the last minute. Well, that's a crap design then, isn't it, eh? So I end up having to cut it almost sideways to avoid touching. Boo hiss, frankly. Thankfully they are small marks, but it's not ideal. I mean, like I say, absolute piddler. If you've got it done really well and then you find you have to fret level because the tool has got no real option or there's no alternative. Now, the start of these can be flat. Here's a bit, so I'm getting rid of that straight away. That didn't cut because that's the duff end of these, which is already given up. Now I've got some stainless steel fretting to do later this week, and I've got a sneaky feeling that this is going to be the end of these pliers, and in a way I won't be too sad if it is. I don't want to spend a ton more money and having to go probably buying from somewhere like StuMac. That's not fair. I sound begrudging. I've never had a problem buying from StuMac. Their stuff has been great quality and lasted for a long time, so there's no problem with that. It's just more expensive and it takes longer and all that. Okay, so look, I've got a bunch of frets here. I'm going to sort of push down, I'll try and push down halfway. Problem is they've got a little bit of this twist. Now I want to try and get rid of that a little bit, not because I want to cut an overhang really per se, but I don't want it twisting, stopping these sitting in. So can I cut an overhang but still have the metal come to the very edge, please? That's what I'm trying to do. Probably just something like that. It's not ideal. I haven't really cut myself that much material to permit that, so I won't do that again. Yeah, so there is a bit of a kink in these, so I'm going to put them half and half if I can, right down the middle. And the reason for this is then, with a bit of luck, I should be able to run down and cut them much shorter to the sort of minimum length we need. But ultimately I'm going to fret them sort of raw-ended, you might say, like this. There is a bit of a curvature on some of these tangs it doesn't like. I'm going to do another check on the tang width, because these going to feel like they're going to be very snug when it goes in. And there's a difference between being very snug and being just enough to force the slot apart a little bit. And if you do that, it kind of feels good because it's a solid fit. But the problem you have is that it tends to push the surface of the fretboard open and causes you a bit of back bow, which means the whole neck starts to bend upwards, or has an upward bend, because you've lengthened the top part of it thanks to all the extra metal you've fitted in there. And this doesn't want to sit in there much at all. will double check these tangs because this feels... Now, I guess the idea would be that I could cut this back. And it does cut it vertically, which is great. That's about the only good thing about this, I can genuinely tell you. It gives a nice, clean vertical cut, which would be, it makes the end of the fret look good. So this is giving us a sort of head start on not having to physically remove so much at the end of the fretting with the bevel file. A little bit difficult to reach in here while you've got other frets around, so if it's really difficult, it might make sense to remove the ones I've just cut, but I don't really want to do that just yet because I'll lose the alignment, which is quite handy. So I'll try and get all my way to the end, thus. That's good. Bits, oh hazel bits. Come down this way and we'll do the same again. So this is, as you can see, it's not even glued in. We're not even at that stage. We're just at the getting it all to the right length stage. Now I'm going to look down here, and if there's one of these frets or two that has this chip on it to any significant degree, I'm going to use the leftover material that we've got and I'm going to recut, because I don't want to be starting from on a back foot, if you get what I mean. It's stupid for the sake of saving a bit of spare fret wire, and it's never enough to do a whole neck with anyway, so it's just sort of hanging around on the shelf for a day in the future when I get in. I need the same type of grade again, so it's sort of a pipe dream. Come on, do as you're told. The fact that these are sort of turning out when I'm trying to press them down has me a little bit worried about the fit. So if I find that they are not comfortably fitting, I will widen the slots a tiny bit. I'll do that sort of manually. Okay, so we get a good cut but a tiny twist. So what I can do, wherever it's gone, yesterday, where did it go yesterday? It's not on there, not there, not there, not there. Not there. What time have we got? Holy cow, 10 to 9 already. Blimey, one time whiz by. Okay, I've temporarily misplaced a useful set of pliers, which are good for doing exactly what I need to do right now, and which can only be done with, there they are. So when you get a little, if you get a little twist at the end, it can be good to just literally strain it out. So it goes in tidy. I hope it's that one there. And then these all look pretty straight cut actually. Okay, so first question is, quality control runs along here with a marker pen and says, which are the ones that are just stupidly damaged and will be foolish to try and make work? Well, that one's got a ding on it. That one's got one there. That one's got a little tiny one there. That's got a tiny one there. Depressing, isn't it? And that one's got one there. That is about it. So that's actually 5. Well, we've got enough material, so you know what? To heck with it. I'm not going to fart about, causing myself and you trouble. It would be kind of cool if this would actually cut nicely here. See, it's going to dent the thing behind if I'm not careful. Slant. Anything on there? No. Good. Let's lift that. Let's try the same approach. It's not the same approach at all, but hopefully it'll work. Goodbye. Yeah, just silly. I think I will obviously need to replace this because it's very hard to get it to work without getting that little ding on it, no matter how carefully you do everything. As soon as it touches that body of that thing, it will make a bite on it. Okay, so I think the first thing I'll do is I will cut one end square like that, place it there, flush with that, or a little bit, tiny bit sticking out. Then I'll do the same. Oh, of course, I've got to be sure that this isn't clamping down and doing the same damage. Can't be. Yeah. And there. Good. Square and square. No, that's crimped it. And we don't want that. Come on, fellas. Give me a break. A bit wonky now. Bit sticking out there, bit sticking out there. Better. Square end. Sit tight. Now, back over here. Flush cut, ping, flush cut, and again. And one more down here. Okay, I think that's a good situation to be in. We've got a good set there. So really, the next stage of this is to press these in on the printing press. I think we ought to do that tonight. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to set up over there by the press and we'll just press it in and we'll have it dry overnight. And tomorrow we can come back and swipe off the sticky out bits, all right? So see you shortly. I'm doing something very naughty here. I'm doing this with the radio on. I'll get done for copyright. They'll go, you have copied the BBC's Radio 4 Extra something or other. Frankie Howard. Anyway, we'll see if they put me on a copyright ban for life. Be funny if they do, but hey. Old-fashioned, very. Okay, so here we are, starting with the business. Can do one first and then I'll line up a few. Just get a feel of how the first one goes. Feel about the squeezability of it and the degree to which it goes in cleanly. Wet cloth, always to hand. Always handy to have to hand.
Part of James Bond was played by Alma Cogan.
So let's have a quick look. So first of all, I wipe off the glue, then a line of a bit of water down the side and at the end a bit of wet cloth, and then a bit of a clear up and a squeeze, fingernails down the side. And then we inspect it and we go, yeah, that is looking pretty fine. And if we're in the mood, we can give it another test squeeze just to be absolutely sure. And the second squeeze will, I'll stop that. Second squeeze tends to show you where there's any left, any left to squeeze out. And that's very, very small amount, a little bit on the end. The question of whether these tangs, they'll get to the edge, but the question is the slot is a little bit deeper than the tang, which is fine, can live with that. Okay, so now I'm going to line up a series in a few in a go on the trot, so I don't have to be too careful when it comes to applying the glue. You just want it in there. That's easy. It does dry pretty quickly on here, so it'll stay wet in the slot for a while, but what happens is it tends to form a skin on the surface if you don't wipe that up quick enough. So I'm just sort of ladling it in casually, carelessly. I'm going to do about 4 or 5 in a row, and in fact I could do as many as reaches the end of this flat heel section, because the thing about this is I tend to do it with the heel down this time, then we have to turn over, and there's a point at which it doesn't quite, it's neither fish nor fowl or heel nor neck, and it sort of wants to sort of bend the neck a little bit, so it's not quite the best place, but it always works. But it's sort of just a little bit in between. So I'm just getting these loaded up. Okay, so then we very swiftly line up these. Now they're cut very precisely at the moment, so we've got to get them lined up very precisely as well. We want that little extra bit over each side, and then we're going to go and slam press them all in one go. Doesn't matter if they get a bit mucky at this stage. We're just fighting against the glue drying out on the surface. Once upon a time, you probably heard me saying this before, but I used to press a load of frets in like this with wood glue, and then I would put them all in a radius block and clamp them for the night and come back. My feeling is if they don't seat properly in one go now, no amount of clamping with wood glue is really going to make any difference. You know, wood glue is not the kind of glue that will hold it if it wants to spring back out, and actually super glue is good for that. So if you're ever in a situation where your frets are, for some reason or other, there's something, the slot's too big and you've got to get them to either squeeze down at one end because the fretboard is a little bit inconsistently shaped or something. If you're in that sort of situation, super glue will be your friend at that point. But it's unforgiving in the sense that once you put it down, there isn't a lot of room for renegotiation. You're down and that's it. So with the wood glue, I always kind of go back over the wood with a damp cloth like this, just kind of get everything dampened off so it can clean up, and then you give it another squeeze down, just to be on the safe side, and then we'll sort of clean up with fingernails after that. So it's nice to get a good run of frets in one go. A little bit of squeeze out on the ends, which is to be expected. Like I said, generally speaking with frets, if they don't seat, if you've not got them seated comfortably on their own, and you need glue to hold them down, then you're fighting against something that's less than ideal, whether it's the surface of the wood isn't properly prepared, or possibly the radius is off, or you've got a lot of roll off on the edge of the neck which you haven't anticipated or didn't realise. So by and large, the guide is they should be seated first couple of pushes, and if they don't seat, then it's not working and you have to rethink. So it's about here you can stop and look down at the neck and you can say to yourself, is that pretty much spot on? And actually that is very good. So I'm mightily pleased with that. This neck is so thick, I could probably get a couple more. Actually, I could get them done from there onwards. So I've switched it over now, and we're going to go. I've switched the neck call over, so we can just now get ready and do them that way. So we can get this bit done pretty quickly. It's the leaving it overnight, coming back, and then doing the finishing, which takes more time. It takes a fair bit of time, but it's been, it takes a while in taking the guitar apart, prepping the neck, getting the nut out, preparing the replacement nut to a certain degree of readiness, but not quite enough till we know exactly how much we need to continue to take off the nut. So it's all it's it's a complicated little process, but I find it really enjoyable. I mean, I wouldn't mind snorkeling in the Maldives instead, but apart from that, you know, it's a nice thing to be doing. Tomorrow night we've got that football thing going on. I honestly don't know if I can bring myself to watch it. I used to follow football and I used to sort of invest myself in it, and it just got, and you know, people of my age will know this, there was too many decades of that just horrible disappointment and letdown after all these knife edge cliff hanging just horrors, really. You know, I think the last moment I just couldn't watch any more afterwards was probably Beckham getting sent off for kicking somebody in the legs in the final or semi-final, or however far we got in about 1990, was it? 1995, something like that, 1996, Euro 96, wasn't it? Yeah, I think that's when he had a little tantrum on the pitch, and we were struggling anyway as a team and all that stuff. And I remember me and my mate Doug, who were teaching together at the time, we were watching it in the student union bar. I think we'd had loads of, I don't know, vodka and cokes and Red Bulls to kind of stay with it. And I think I just remember that leaving a sort of horrible, frazzled, poor man's speed type of feeling at the end of it all, when it all went pear-shaped and horrible, and you know, just wanting to kind of never do it again. And I don't think I've ever done it again since. No matter where I've been, I have not followed England football with any real sense of attachment. You know, and I genuinely think we as a nation, we got horribly used to just hoping beyond hope, and then watching lousy performances and seeing our team crash out, and you know, that sort of just became too familiar. Too often we saw it, too often. And I think you know, I remember there was the era of what seemed like the big stars, and I'm afraid to say David Beckham was the kind of figurehead of that era. You know, when footballers really started becoming multi-millionaire superstars, and it seemed as if they just couldn't handle it, and that they lost all sense of proportion about the honour of playing for a country in a national, you know, in an international tournament. And you know, it was the Stevie Gerrard, David Beckham, Phil Neville, you know, all that sort of era when Michael Owen, Wayne Rooney came through, and you know, it was that era when they were multi-million pound earners every week. They were earning more than, you know, any of us earned in a lifetime, kind of thing. And it just I think it put I don't know, maybe it did, maybe it just made them, they lost any sense of hunger, and maybe that was because they were spoiled with having too much money to spend, and maybe it was a transition generation, because it seems like, you know, the footballers we got at the moment, I don't know that much about them, or I don't know many names, but you know, of the ones that we see, they seem to be fairly humble kids, some of them with quite a strong sense of principle, family values and moral frameworks and stuff. And you know, it's nice to see, really. Maybe, I mean, I guess they get paid all the millions still, but maybe they seem to handle it better, or actually maybe many of them are doing something spiritually fulfilling with it, the money, instead of just spending it on girls and cars. Hey, I'm being idealistic, maybe they just are spending it on girls and cars, but being a bit more civilized about it, who knows. But it seemed like a more down-to-earth bunch. But how can somebody who earns, I don't know, £250,000 a week or whatever it is, how can they be down to earth, really? You know, that sort of money, it's got to corrupt you one way or another. It ain't right. Anyway, so we shall see. got a feeling I might prefer to be doing something up here than watching it though. That could be, just can't bear to. Cowardice, maybe you could call it. Who knows? When I started being bothered by football, I was never an early football fan, but I got into it in my sort of teens, early teens, a bit. I was hopeless at playing it, but I used to spend Saturday afternoons in Coventry when I lived there in my teens, lying on the floor with Subutio set up and listening to I don't know, whatever it was, the sports roundup or whatever live commentary you could hear on the radio. And I used to listen to it on this kind of squelchy old radiogram. It used to be in originally it was in my dad's room, but I kidnapped it and nicked it. Yeah, so I used to sort of spend I remember some winter's evenings listening to far-flung European matches with, it was Liverpool always playing Juventus in some exotic location in Europe that you'd never heard of, but it was always a massive kind of deal. And it was always fading in and out of reception. There was none of this clear digital signal business or DAB or any of that stuff. You were kind of hunting for the clear signal, and you'd miss chunks of the action because it would fade out and fade back in. But you knew it was a miracle that it was, you know, floating across the sea through the airwaves and coming to you from somewhere in Spain or Russia or something. It's romantic, I tell you. But I think that the last, I do remember, and some of this will show you how old I really am. But I remember caring a damn about what's his name? Oh God, Scotland, when they went to Argentina in 1978, was it? Ali McLeod or McCoist, no, it wasn't Ali McCoist. We were on the march with Ali's Army or something, that was the song that they sang. We're off to the Argentine, and we'll really shake them up when we get beaten and kicked off and sent home in disgrace. Oh no, that's not how it went. It went, we'll really shake them up when we win the World Cup, because Scotland are in their heads the greatest football team. It was such a build-up. Oh my God. And you know, it was in the days where you didn't care that it wasn't England going, it was British, you know, and it was Scottish, and you had to support them. And they went off and they came back, and well, I was going to say it was disgrace to a certain extent. It was, but it was only, I felt it was a disgrace because of the hype that they'd done and all the mouthing off about, you know, I think the song did it for me, that, you know, to actually put out a song that says, we'll really shake them up when we win the World Cup because Scotland are the greatest football team, and then you go and don't do it. That's about as bad as it can get in terms of bravado or bragging. You know, you deserve to come back home with your tail between your legs in shame for having sung that out loud in public. And so they did. But I do remember, if I'm not mistaken, I remember they absolutely screwed up the first sort of, I don't know, I mean, you tell I don't know much about football, but whatever, the final qualifying and the final 12, whatever. That bit where they gone out to the World Cup and they lost all the games that should have been straightforward, and it was just, you know, hands over your eyes time, and then didn't they get into a situation, I seem to recall, they got into a situation where they were almost certainly out of the World Cup, and then they played Holland. Is that right? Is my memory correct? They played Holland in this sort of last ditch game, and there was something in it that was, if they beat Holland 7-0 or something, and if Germany lost to Paraguay, I don't know, I'm making this up, but you know, it was one of those moments of sort of sheer British desperation that we seem to be good at. In fact, Pink Floyd did capture that pretty well, the hanging on in quiet desperation, you know, that you find yourself 79 minutes into the last game they're going to be playing, and I seem to remember, was it Archie Gemmell did something unbelievable and scored and brought the possibility of this. It could be they had to win 4-3 or 4-0 or something, and it was, I think it wasn't something like Archie Gilmore scored to make it 3-0 against whoever, Holland, and it was just this unbelievable, just this incredible possibility of maybe going through. And I seem to remember at the time thinking that they played out their skins at that point, and it was truly spectacular, you know, because it was so Britishly up against the wall, you know. But my God, did they play? That was it exciting, you know, to come from absolute disgrace and embarrassment and humiliation. It was I think it was almost like a formality, this game, that they just had to go through the motions because, you know, they'd blown it so badly. I might be over exaggerating what the chances were here, but to me as a kid, it seemed, anyone who was there will remember, but it seemed that it was so British. There was this little thin sliver of hope that could it be possible? Could it just be possible? And I do remember them playing an absolute blinder at that point. Now I'm looking down here. This is the telltale bit. Now one of these is certainly sticking out that way too far, and it's sticking out the line, and it's catching my eye because of that. But it's pointing to me to this one, which is behind that one, and that one. And then there's that one. That one seems to be standing up just a fraction. I'm just going to swing on this like a crazy loon. And sometimes, you know, if you have something that you think is just sitting up at one edge, you can sort of rotate the way the neck is sitting in the caul just enough to push a little bit of the edge upwards a little bit. I can't really, it's very hard to see. This one down here is sticking out quite a long way, so it's really throwing everything else off. That one looks high, and that one looks flat, low. And I don't know if that's something to do with, it's fitting perfectly with this one. This one definitely looks a little high on the far side. I'll give it another shot, but I mean, bottom line is we'll fret level out any anomalies when it comes to it, because we expect there to be some unevenness, as simple as that. It's nigh on impossible to get it play ready first go. Yeah, there's a little bit of what it is this one actually looks fractionally low, and I don't know how that one can be low. Whether this one is sitting high because it's not got enough room. The slot looks a bit deeper, it's just hard to know. What we'd find is when we put a rocker on it, we'll find that this one rocks a little bit. I go and find the rocker, if I can find a rocker. Not sure how much I trust this old rocker, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some clickety clacking going on. He said, bloody hell, no, it's making a monkey out of me. That's amazing. It's not, oh, there's one. So that's the low one, that's the high one. So interesting. Yeah, so how does that feel? How can that be so low? But there it is. Yeah, it's amazing. So how does one fret get to sit low compared to the others? Can it be anything to do with the fret itself? No, it's got to be the surface it's sitting on. Can we encourage it to stand out a little bit? Maybe. Yeah, that's funny enough. That was sitting a fraction low. Now, whether I what I'm going to do a little trick here, and I might just let it dry in exactly that place, and I may look at wicking a tiny bit of super glue into there, just in this one, just because I want it to stay put. Not very good lighting going on here, but that was, yeah, there's something about that was pressed down a little bit lower than everything else around it, for God knows why. Now this will set, so we know it's, which one is it? Oh, Hellfire. It's that one, isn't it? Not anymore. That one. Is it the fifth one? Let's just make sure we can see what we're seeing. Fifth one, it's a short one. Yeah, it's a short one before the long one, if you get what I mean. So I'm going to mark it, and I'm going to mark it at this end here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just see if I can, when it's not that one, so it's this one, I might just wick in a little tiny bit of super glue. In fact, I might even do it now while it's there, like it's there and we've got it in front of us. And it is just for the point of view, I want this to sort of set in place, because there's something very odd about that part of the edge of the fretboard, and it is nothing we can do anything specifically about, which is kind of weird. So I'm going to drip a bit into there if I can, and we can always sand back and scrape this remainder off. There you go. Get in there, give it a little bit of push to feed it in. Fine. That will help things. It's just a very odd little anomaly that was. I mean, I'd rather have it, that one, stand up just a tiny bit and then glue it into place with super glue than kind of be having to bring the others down to meet it because it's got an unusually low spot. And as I say, I can't tell you why it's unusually low. It may be the way I pressed them, but know. What we can do is to make this super glue stuff go off. Let's use the glue boost activator. Fizzle, frazzle. That should be good. A little bit of runoff there, which I'm just going to scrape back to tidy up. So that's just a little detail. Everything else about that was, about the fretting, seemed spot on except one fret doing that, which is very odd. But I think we should be all right. Stay it in place. Right, we'll trim it back and nobody will be the wiser, except you and me. So that's that for tonight. I think I'm going to cut the video there. We are laid, leveled, and let it dry out overnight. And tomorrow we'll get this wicked beastie onto it to trim it back to absolute flush, and then we'll hand tidy or hand trim the edges so that they're soft. Okay, thank you for watching this bit. I don't know what you've been seeing. I'm so sorry about the camera work. Do forgive me. Okay, well, I'm breaking a traditional habit of got the radio on because it's, you know, football night, isn't it? And there it is, talking to me. So hopefully you've got a decent signal to noise ratio. I could probably turn this down just a tiny little bit. I only need to hear the sort of background thing. Anyway, look, I've jumped ahead a bit here, and I know it's a bit naughty. I've finished the refret, finished the fret beveling, end beveling, done the nut, fitted some dummy strings, and I'm just sort of checking out the geometry and everything. Interestingly, when I put this neck back on, the neck was seating when I put it on a lot lower than it was before I took it off. So there's maybe it wasn't fully tightened down at the back end here, but something a little bit odd, so it took it down a little bit, so I had to shim it just to bring it up, and a tiny little thin piece of tin, a little strip of tin at the back end there, but that brought it back up to meet this. You could just about get down to action by screwing these right down, but I didn't want to go all the way that far down because there's no give in either direction. So what I've done is I've marked up the frets ready for leveling, and here we are ready to do fret leveling. Now I'm curious about this bridge because I don't see where the radius is set on this bridge. I have a weird feeling that it's a fixed radius, or maybe there's some way of raising it up. I look in here and honestly I can't see anything. There may be something missing from it, but it seems to be at a set radius. And when I look, sorry, it's not a very good way of doing it. When I look across here, this looks practically flat. So not impressed with the lack of radius adjustment. What it means is these strings are flying off the edge here, lower in the middle, higher on the edges. Not good. You don't want a flat thing on this is a vintage radius, 7.5 inch radius. Is it 7.5? Is that what we said it was? Oh, blimey, I can't remember now. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, it was 7.5. So we've got 7.5 inch radius, a completely flat bridge, and actually what is a 9.5 nut up here. So I may have to just make a tiny adjustment. Also, I'm not convinced on the angle back on this thing, so I'm going to need to cut sloping backwards on this just to ensure that this plays completely clear. It's a choice about, I've said this to John when we met, I'm not massively confident in these staggered tuner posts. It's a nice idea, but in my experience it doesn't actually work out in practice. So people sort of fit them up and then they suffer on with strings that sort of, I mean, I'll give you an example. I don't know if you can hear this with the radio, but there's this sound versus, whoops, well, not much difference, but it's almost straight through, and it makes me nervous personally. Okay, so I've just calibrated this, so I'm now going to do some fret leveling whilst keeping my ear on the football, which is surprisingly 1-0 to the English. What can we say? So, okay, so here we are with doing a bit of fret leveling. I've also flattened the neck out well, I've left it with a little bit of relief, but not that much, just a tiny whiff. So what I'm just looking to do here now is to just get these frets cutting up a little bit, and I just want to see what the fret leveling file is going to tell me, and I think that's interesting. So what did we say? I saw that 6 was low. 6 is still fractionally low, even though I sort of bolstered it up with a little bit of glue, but it was a guess. So right now it's not bad, it's barely touching the frets. So I'm just going to start with the sort of usual let's have a feel part of the deal. Every note playing fine. So even if it's technically, somebody very kindly recommended that I should use ginger. I should swallow ginger pills for my wrists because this one is hurting. It's my old bike crash all them years ago. Anyway, so I'm just doing the B track now. I'm using the same calibration. Again, just keeping an eye to see what this is now telling me about the overall condition of the frets. It's actually telling me that I've done a really good by preparation and a bit of luck. This has worked out as a really good level refret. Just there's one fret that I knew was slightly low, a couple of slightly higher ones here, and then there's a potentially a sort of drop off a little bit lower off the edge here. But again, all of this you expect to have happen, and we're not really only really worried about anything that interrupts play. Like I said, I'm not impressed with this flat bridge. A little bit squelchy. Now the problem with this is that it's starting to get low in the middle. I made my measurement from the edge here, but actually what it means is if the edge is reading at, what is it currently reading at? 1.2 1.56, 1.6. The middle is, because it's flat, it's ridiculous. It's so much lower. How did Barnier Brenner do this? Because it's no good. So really, I have no choice but to raise this up, to raise these middle ones up to some sort of thing. I might try and do some research, but these are coming in at about 1 millimeter, which is absolutely squeaking it in terms of height. But that's the problem of if you've ever imagined having a bridge which is actually dead flat, it's pointless. It's got to have the radius, otherwise you're going to get flying high strings at the edges with, you know, strings that are too low and buzzing in the middle. Not good. So there's something either missing from this bridge, or there's a secret to it that either I don't know and or John didn't tell me about. You hear that? I need to know. So I'm just pulling this out of the way. Harry Kane is causing the Italian defence all sorts of problems. Okay, the G track now. This is a critical one in lots of ways. Partly because it always is. If you think about it, the E string or the B, when you're bending them and making big bends, they always bend up and over the fret. If you think of the fret as a sort of hill, so it's always coming up the hill, and consequently, that if the frets, if the frets on this track, the G track, if they're high, or in this case, if we got extremely low action thanks to this weird bridge, then what we've got is a likelihood of choke out, which it's doing here, you see. Right in the centre, so that's telling me the G needs some more work. But let's have a think. No, the G needs some work, but it's not because the G string is low, because the E string is not confined in the same way as, it's not anchored to the same place as the G. So if the E string is currently just about choking out, it will be because the frets have a slight unevenness to them, and that we still need to get that out. So it's important to observe. It's not because of this problem here, that's a separate thing. But if the E string is choking, it's either the E string is too low and we're trying to push it up a hill, the geometry is killing it off. Remember, this is a 7.5 radius. We don't expect to get the usual ultra low action out of this, and have the bends work as well. It's a geometric impossibility. It just doesn't work. But I'm just going to get it there. The problem with this I've got is I can't, because of this bridge, I can't set this all at the correct height. All I can do, and I'll show this now, let's say I'm struggling now to make this play without choking out, and I say it's because I'm bending an E across a 7.25 and you don't expect it to play. Trouble is, this problem is this isn't actually the correct height, because it's lower in the middle, higher at the edges, but it's not even the correct height. So that's registering 1.2, which is for a 7.25 is impossible anyway. So let's just take this back. Also, what we've got is a strange unevenness on this bridge as well, which I find a bit odd. So we go 1.5, which for a 7.25 is very difficult. That puts us to a 1 in the middle, which is still too low for this, but we might get away with it on the G. So yeah, we might get a bit more out of that. Let's do a little tiny bit more on the G. In fact, I'll go back on the B and then the G again. It's these frets here, but we're not really getting to them, which is a bit odd. Ow, picks up the blade as well as the legendary banana. Okay, so that's really a bit overbent. So it's Sunday, folks. Sunday the Sunday the 1966 of July. It's like the olden days. Well, you know what? I was stopped on the way home and I was talking to a young lad in our neighbourhood. And I said, are you watching the football tonight? He said, yeah, you. And I said, well, I couldn't believe I wasn't. And I said, well, you got to remember, I'm older than you and I've spent many years being heartbroken and disappointed. But he was excited, good for him. So he's no doubt watching it. Good, back to the G one more time. Go right up that top end with the G, concentrate on the top end this time. I mean, it is a different feel to it. I said the other day about, I think I said the other day about talking about how these lads seem to be, even though they're getting paid more than more than any players probably have ever been paid still, but they sort of do it with, I don't know, a bit more, less, I don't know, not self-obsession isn't quite the right word, but they seem to be a bit humbler in some ways, and a bit more socially oriented, and so they do some really okay, let's keep going. We'll go across and then we'll check again. So this, like I say, this whole guitar is now curious because of the bridge. I can make the tiny adjustments if we even need to at the end. The actions here are so tiny, the difference between the 7.25 and 9.5 is minuscule, minimal. So I'm not really even too worried about that, but I could make a tiny adjustment if it felt in any way odd. But it's this bridge thing that's got me. I mean, it's hard enough to get a 7.25 radius to play, to do the bends as well as play the notes cleanly. But with a flat radius, totally dead flat radius on your bridge, it really messes things up. So, still, it's probably only really showing up at this point because of what I'm doing now, which is, leveling the neck and getting it ready to play with its new frets. But I think probably wouldn't have been that noticeable for John because its frets would have been nice and old and worn. Now these 6150 frets are fractionally, fraction bit taller than the originals, but that's fine because I like to have a little bit of room in the leveling department. Much prefer to have a little bit of room. See, this is bothering me, right? This is where we struggle. These two are now the lowest two strings on the whole. And I'm trying to keep these from being miles high because they're flat and going straight across. If I set these at what they ought to be, which is about 1.5 millimeters, these are going to be at 2 and something, and it's just going to feel awful. But that's the way this bridge crumbles. So, I guess it's the way that John's got used to it, so I don't think it's going to be a big deal for him. It's just a little bit off-putting for me trying to get this to play in a way that I think plays well. But I think by the time I get it done, we'll just be able to live with that. How that adjusts, if it even does, I don't know. It looks like it's been set flat and left flat, which doesn't seem feasible to me. But not knowing the bridge and its mechanism, I can't really not in a very good position to pronounce on it, I'm afraid. So I may well, I'll get it playing as well as I can, and then I'll get John to see whether it's adjustable as far as he's concerned. It might, I mean, potentially it hasn't bothered him up till now. I mean, you could argue potentially that the slots down here are slightly deeper, and if you tilted this right up, theoretically, this front end, you would benefit from the difference in the depths of the slots. But that isn't where the string is coming off. The string's coming off a kind of apex in there, which, well, it looks like it's slightly different, but I really don't detect much of a radius in there, and certainly nowhere near 7.25. So I put that in there like that. We are miles off these middle two strings. So in other words, this is dead flat and this isn't, of course, and this is what we're working with. So that's a weird mismatch that I hadn't really anticipated, but it's definitely at play. But I guess it will make the guitar characteristic feel the way that John knows it. A little bit of fizzle needed up there still. Yeah, I wouldn't be thrilled. You never know, that might have a specific radius. It might be an 18-inch radius built on there, for all I know. I don't know, but it appears to have some sort of differentiation, but it's certainly way flatter than the radius. It could just be as simple as saying this bridge really isn't built for working with a vintage 7.5, and that may be where you have to leave the assessment, really. You know, it's one of those things, it just can't happen. But we're trying to make the best of both of the worlds, that's the way. I'm just going to try and concentrate on leveling a bit down here. So after this, I think I may get this finished tonight. Once I've done this, then it's home to pack a guitar. That's going off to Drew tomorrow in courier. Well, I've got to book the courier and pack the guitar. And I'll either be doing it in the shadow of the the victorious England and all that, or it'll be we were cheated on penalties and extra time, or whatever the story is, and then somebody will say, well, that makes up for having nicked a penalty off the Danes, and so on and so on and so on. And of course, getting to a final ain't bad anyway, is it, really? Okay, I think I'm happy with that. Let us remove the strings, let us clean the things up, let us re-crown the frets. These are Harley Benton strings, so they are going straight in the bin, having done the service, and we'll refret with the supplied 10s, or some 10s if we haven't got supplied ones. Can't remember now. Oh, no, that is... Oh, I don't like that thing. Why has that done that? Is this even fitted? Oh, God. This isn't... This bridge doesn't really work with this guitar. I don't know if it was even ever set up that way. This is not right. This is not sitting correctly. I'm going to take the strings off and have a closer look, but it's either twisted or something's not right about it. Anyway, the fret leveling is not kind of informed or dictated by that, so we don't have to worry about that. We can take care of the frets separately and worry about the bridge fitting. It's a bit of an oddity. It's a hybrid, see, because it's got a Wilkinson bass with some Brenner thing chucked on top, and I'm not convinced that they're meant to be together. I know John would readily admit that, because he's done, I guess he's done loads of experimentation with this guitar in his time. See, the problem is what you can't do with a guitar like this is just refret it and then stick everything else back together and hope it'll be the same way. Of course it isn't, because the refret is a substantial change. A major change. So what I'm concerned about is the way this Wilkinson bridge, this post is wobbling, and this doesn't, sits at a different place. Oh God, I don't like this at all. If we go down, see, this is not, it's not built for this. It doesn't want to do it. There's something wrong. You can probably hear it even if you can't see it. It sort of sits there just about, but it's not really that happy. Well, it is on the knife edges there. Well, we'll leave it there and see if that improves anything. I'll take this down a bit. See, then it pushes it backwards. That's so bizarre. Oh, look at it. See, as soon as you've got this thing, I hate that when you push and the whole thing goes off sideways. Is that because this doesn't really meant to fit this thing here? It could even be that. I'm not sure what the options are really, short of a different bridge altogether. Just looking at this here, this thing is supposed to have a radius in it, a very slight radius, but it's there's no way it's anywhere near what we kind of want. So this is just a floating little device, sits on there. I don't know what these bits at the back do. There's some screw holes there that I would have maybe thought did that, possibly, but there's nothing in them, so I don't know if they work. And there's a bit of to and fro. I'm not even sure. If I'm honest, I'm not even convinced there's that much intonation spread on these apexes here. So it's a very peculiar thing, and I put my own arm on here for a minute. I'm not at all convinced about this. Ouch. Let me just have a look while we're here. I hate putting things, finishing something off when it's less than optimal. Let's remove these. So I can see straight away that I don't think this began as a two-point bridge. That's the first thing. I think it began as possibly something else. Let's just take this off and have a look. Okay, well, this one is sticking up higher than that one slightly. Yeah, this was an old 6-screw tremolo, and so this conversion hasn't really worked. It is slightly gone wonky. So also they don't sit flat. That's the other thing, because the brass inserts stick up a little bit. So just trying to think what's feasible. I mean, we just have to kind of work with what's there. Okay. We come to fine-tune some adjustments when we put some strings on lightly again. I mean, that's ideally where we want to go from, that position there. But we shall see. Let's put the strings back on. Still we play on. No, we don't. See, it pushes forward. It's maybe. We shall see. Now, the reason I had it, just for your info, the reason I had it on decked back, I fully screwed in, is because when I'm setting the action and everything, I don't want floating tremolo. I want it consistent and stable. So I set it, dial it in until it's locked down basically, and then at that point I afterwards, when it's all where it should be, then what I do is what I'm looking for is dial it up to until it's got a range of floating movement. But the interesting thing about that is I learned, or found out the hard way, that when you do that, when you float a standard range of float on a Strat, what happens is you raise the action by half a mil, typically half a mil. So what I'll do is before I set the float, I'll set the action to where I like it. Then I will go back by half a mil, which is, well, I don't know what it is on these posts. On the grub screws on a standard Strat, it's a 180 degree turn, but we'll see. But I'll lower it then by half a mil, and then we'll dial it up to the ideal range of movement, and then that will be at its correct playing height. But it's a sort of tricky thing to do, to get it back to the given range of movement without substantially increasing the height, or you know, sort of just doing it stab in the dark kind of approach. So yeah, this is thrown up a few little quirks, which I'm hoping, well, the ones that's disappointed me most is the lack of adjustable radius on the bridge, and that sort of maybe it's there is some way of doing it and the bits aren't here in the deal, but I'm actually not convinced there is an individual way, because these bits here, this whole section here, is a single unit, and there's nothing individually that moves between them. So I think they are set in a pre-established radius, maybe for a particular, for all I know, it could have been made for one model of guitar, and therefore made to that radius, but it doesn't work with doesn't really work with a 7.25, the tightest of all vintage, radiuses, you know, which is the 7.25. been a fair bit of beer consumed around the country at the moment. Right, so that's re-crowning. So now what I want to do is get rid of as much of this dust and marker pen as possible. Oh, very full, I forgot. Just watching that gold again and again and again. So, all that marker pen coming off. I'm going to go back home and I'm going to pack a guitar, but before I do, I'm going to lightly sand back the body of Trekkie 9, and then I'm going to put another coat of True Oil on it, and I'll leave that overnight. Right, get the dust away there. There'll be a bit more coming up later on, so we're not into clean-up mode yet. Well, there we have it. Nice feel to the refret. There's a tiny shim I've put in the side there because this neck is also slightly off centre or off correct alignment. So a little bit of a I've kind of moved it a little bit to one side and then put a tiny sandpaper shim in there just to hold it so it's not trying to, it can't push its way back in if the screws slack a little bit. Right, so the game now is to mask this all off and polish it out, which is the usual time consuming business. So to be honest, I'll just carry on filming because I'll get as far as I can tonight. I've got till about 9:30, and then that's sort of about it. Now I'm conscious that the fingerboard down the side here, that the finish is a combination of knackered and gone. I wouldn't say it's knackered, it's not like it's flaking finish, it's sort of worn out, old worn out finish. I mean, it may have been relic to be that, but it looks good. So I'm trusting it to work with the masking tape is what I'm saying. Low tack. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sand out all these frets and polish them, and then we'll come back and we'll basically load up the strings again onto the bridge, and we'll make sure we've got it where we want it, as good as it will be. But it's like I say, it's a kind of weird combination. I've never seen this bridge before, so I would like to. I'm just going to hang this up a minute. I would like to do a bit of looking around, see if I can find anything, because yeah, well, my temptation for a nice old vintage Strat like this with such a lovely neck is to put a 7.25. Sorry, no. Put a classic Strat tremolo bridge in there, 6 screw probably, and go back to being able to set the radius, you know, in accordance with the very tight 7.25 vintage. But you know, I guess that John's been playing this for years and not had an issue with it, so it's not for me to, you know, iron out all the quirks in somebody else's guitar that they, you know, they are used to and like, you know, sort of a forced improvement that doesn't really work very well. The thing I've seen again about this this guitar of John's is I really do like the noiseless pickups. There's something I think they've got quite a nice tone. And no, if you're a purist, they're not quite the same as the single coil, you know, open to 50 cycle hum, all that business. But I find that as a good quality Strat noise plus what's this? We got water coming through here. I'm sure my containers are catching the water. No, so maybe this is, if I've dragged water across here. No, maybe it's oil. Oh. Keep an eye out. I'm sure there's no water coming through here. In fact, I'm positive. I've got some containers at the top catching any water. That's weird. Anyway, where was I? Something about 7.25 inch radius. Blah blah blah. Weird combination of things. I guess that's what you get when you do Partscasters, isn't it? You combine things, and it's obviously the Brenner piezo bridge is quite a particular thing. So for all I know, it may have been made for you know, like I say, a particular guitar, and then you know, they build in a radius and that's it. You never need to change it because you wouldn't move it off that guitar, but I don't know. So maybe if you know, you can tell me. Okay, let's cover this up. I see, Italy have had more attempts on goal than the Brits have, eh? The Englanders have, I should say, not the Brits. They're not Scottish. Cherry Butcher. I saw that Kenny Dalglish once on the motorway. I was driving along and so was he, but the difference between us is that he was Kenny Dalglish and he had a chauffeur and he was in the back, and I was driving myself along. That's how it was. I can't remember when it was exactly. I think I saw Kevin Keegan on the motorway as well. Not in the same car as Kenny Dalglish. So this is Radio 5 live, so if BBC want to do me for copyright of their material, if their algorithm, I don't think it would manage to find a single commentary and compare it. Anyway, today also was the day that Richard Branson, the great Virgin boss, took a ride to space with some colleagues to the edge of space and into weightlessness for a few minutes in his Virgin Intergalactica, or whatever it's called, Intergalactic. I thought they read a letter that he dedicated to his, or tribute he dedicated to his late mother, about how she had kind of encouraged him to aim high and fight for things, and it was a very touching tribute from a chap to his mum. Oh, speaking of which, I got to ring my mum. That's what I probably ought to do while I'm doing this, instead of listening to fuzzball. How about I do that? How about I just get off, carry on doing this? So I think I'll do that, because thank you, Richard Branson, Sir Lord Richard Branson, because you know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to get my sandpaper down, which I'm almost run out of, and I'm going to sand my way merrily over all of these frets until I don't like these bits of crud stuck to there. I'm going to sand out the frets with all the different grits and stuff until they're nice and shiny and ready to play. I don't like this bit of paper, it's annoying me. So it's a familiar, boring process. And when I have done that, I'll be ready to restring with the working strings, the final strings. As I say, I don't think the difference of the radii at the far end there at the nut is anywhere near enough to worry or to warrant sticking the files into. I might just have a go with the file at the back edge of the nut, just to make sure those two thin ones are genuinely leaning backwards and not touching any part of the slot. You know, nothing's supporting them and therefore taking away their ability to ring. That's what I don't like about those staggered tunars, but that's just my personal thing. So that's what I'll do, but I'll do that offline, and I'll hopefully do it while I'm catching up with my ma, like a good son should. I'm sure she won't shout at me for interrupting the footy, because I know that she won't give a toot about the football. She is not that kind of lady, my ma. Now, what I'm going to do, before I go off camera, is I am going to put a bit of green tape on here, just to keep that down and protect the edges. England about to kick off. Thank you. England playing from left to right, as they like to do, apparently. Right, let's go and get on the old dog and bone. The old, I don't know, what's mother-in-law? No, mother. What's that in Cockney rhyming slang? Mother. I don't know. Come on, you Cockneys, you must tell me. So I might, if I time this right, I might get to chat to my mum the whole of the second half and not know what's gone on. Give myself an exciting thrill a bit later on. All right, I will come back when this is all polished out and I'm ready to restring. And actually, looking at the time and stuff, it might be tomorrow. Okay, but I'll get this boring part done just now. See you in a bit. Oh, right. So here we are. It's a Tuesday evening, and it's finally there's some sunshine. And it's a bit steamy again in here, but that's where we go. So I've got John's amazing Partscaster. A couple of little things I've got to take care of along the way. But it's time to string up pretty much. Now I'm just going to park you there. It's been a funny couple of days. I'm going to undo the jack socket here because it's rattlicious. Oh blimey, that's been properly done up, Gov. Done up like a kipper. Sorry, but yeah. So this is I hope this just doesn't shear off like it's been like too tight. No, yeah, it's a weird old sort of guitar. This one. I mean, I loved the way it felt, but I would, I feel like suggesting that this piezo bridge should come off and revert it to some sort of, well, adjustable saddles at least, back onto here. And of course that wouldn't be difficult with this bridge as is. So why am I undoing that one? I'm not supposed to be undoing this one. I'm not supposed to be doing that at all. I was looking at the bridge and undoing the wrong thing. Anyhow, yeah. So that makes it a flat over 7 1/4, which has got to be the weirdest configuration I think I've ever seen. Okay, so we've got the power jack thing going on here, and it extends outwards to the offwards into the piezo pickup piezo department, which is currently non-functional. So I'm just going to use this to hold onto and tighten it up. because it's just come loose, and one of those things, they come loose and that's the end of it, and then they annoy you. I mean, with a strap jack plate like this, at least it doesn't spin around, because it can't really, but it just gets looser and looser until it falls off. I'll try and give it some proper welly there. Refit. Which one is the small one? That one. Okay, so now really it's just restring it, take it home. I've got to go do some grocery shopping now, so that's a real thrill of an evening like this. I could do without it, but I'm not too annoyed, because today I had a chance to have a couple of hours in the sunshine in a hammock, enjoying the sun. Yeah, enjoying the sun. You know, and it's only like today, you know, when the sun actually shines, I realise just how long it's been. It seems literally weeks upon weeks it's been raining, but we are into a patch of better weather now, they say. So, you know, I mean, the thing is, when you're working like this in the workshop, it obviously gets very hot and steamy, because there isn't really much in the way of ventilation here. It's not quite. I was hoping today, I've been watching the weather forecast, hoping for some spray windows, not spraying the windows, but a window of opportunity to spray. And I've got quite a bit of spraying to do. I've got some polyurethane finish to spray, a couple of necks I'm doing in poly, and then I've got a whole set of nitro satin to spray onto the candy apple red bodies. 3 of those to do, so I need a good run of a few days. Can you know which one's which here? They've got colours. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, and then I've probably got more acrylic to do, plus water-based poly down the line. So a mixture of water-based really and nitro cellulose. And the nitro is going to be interesting, because it's going to be the first time that I've sprayed nitro out of the Apollo HVLP device. There's absolutely, who's turned up on the bikes tonight? Absolutely no reason why I shouldn't spray it on there using AHVLP, but it's just a first for me. So I've got my ratio guide of 50-50. So when you put this one on, my advice with both the adjustable nut, first of all, is to start with the D and the G first, to hold the nut in place. We don't want it going anywhere. Next bit of advice is with a locking tuner, I always recommend pulling back about a thumbnail's width before you lock off, and then wind it on. And the reason I do that is it gives me a chance, if I need to undo this again, maybe make an adjustment, take the bridge off, tweak something on the bridge or whatever. But if you don't do that little extra, excuse me, these magnets are misbehaving right now. If you don't do that little extra wind back, what happens is sorry, magnet trouble. What happens is you pull it all the way through, you think, oh, I've got a locking tuner, I'm going to lock it off right there and then. Okay, this is currently down, isn't it? That's right, because I set everything low. Let's get my thing. Yeah, so you don't get a chance to, when you put it all the way through, it crushes the string at the crimp point. So what happens then is, if you want to make an adjustment later on, and as soon as you undo it, try to undo it, the crushed string point comes forward, and it tends to just break at that point because it's weakened, badly weakened already. So that's not a good look, I think. So this little extra thumbnail's worth of push through that I recommend gives you, if you have to do, let's say you want the option for one undo and tighten up, this little thumbnail's width of a centimetre of pullback lets you slack the string off, and then I recommend the next time you can push the string all the way through that time. So you push the badly damaged crimped part, which is guaranteed will already be damaged, you push that through harmlessly out of the way and crimp down on some new, or crush down on some new string. So that's just it's a very simple practical thing that I've discovered, because often in setting up you have to do some adjustments to the bridge or something you didn't expect, or perhaps more so with tunematic bridges and so on, but whichever, I always like to have that little bit of extra wire, and it, people say, well, but I paid money for these locking tuners, I want to use them as simply as they were made. Well, that's cool, but you're only robbing yourself of a chance to take the strings, or slack them once and tighten them up again. So I think it's a good thing. The other thing as well is if you just leave it there now and tighten it up from there, all the force is pulling straight onto the, or usually pulling straight onto the crimped piece of the string. If you have a little bit of a wind on, it alleviates the force or the pressure on that little bit of string, and kind of puts it round the corner a little bit. And that actually prevents the string from breaking so often as well, or helps, I think, to keep the strings from breaking. That's my take on it. Right, so there's my little pullback, lock it off. And actually what I find is if you have that extra little bit of wind on, it encourages you not to lock it so tightly, because the other problem with locking tuners is there's no gauge that anyone can use to tell you how much force to put them on, and quite often we kind of end up locking them too hard because we don't want we can't afford the string to slip. Actually, it's not even we don't want, we might be playing a gig or doing a recording or something, and we just can't have the string come off. So that extra bit of wind without the extra wind, then we tend to really ram the lock part down, so that to make sure that we don't get any string slipping out. But as we do that, we damage the string even more. So I just, for the want of a fingernail's worth of extra wire, I find that's a much better way. Now, while we're still there, I'm going to just get the tuner out and just gently pull these. Now, I said I might stand by with the files just to make adjustments to the slots, and the reason I was just concerned to make sure that the B and the E, make sure that they're facing backwards or angled backwards. So I'm just bringing up the Okay, so right now, let's zoom out a little bit. So there's our strings on. Got a crazy bird fight on the roof going on, I think. Rooks. Okay, so now with the tension on, I'm going to look back and dial these in carefully. The slight, I don't know if it's the slight misplacement of this this bridge post. It seems to make the seems to leave it kind of tending to fall off the pivot here, but it's sitting there quite nicely at the moment. So what I'm trying to do, because of this straight line radius, which is most unusual, what I have to do is take my blimey, we've got a millimetre there, and then it kind of goes to a millimetre, and then it goes to 1 point nothing. So it's a little bit low still. So we'll raise that up that side, and then we'll look down here, which is too high, which ends up with it being a little bit oddly imbalanced, just a little bit. I checked the neck and it's not tilting anywhere unusual, or it shouldn't be. Now, so the problem with this, the flat radius, that's like this practically, is that it means that you've got the E's out here are far too high. Blimey. And that, well, for 7.5 there, everything's too low. So I'm going to have to raise everything up, because otherwise we don't get this playing on a 7.25 inch. But it makes the whole action bizarrely higher on these edges, which I just think is terrible. We've got about 1.25 on the D and the G, and then it increases rapidly. Then we'll get the tuning going again. That angle's not good enough. If I were to get a blade and run that across here, actually placed on the string, I don't know what we'd see in terms of an angle. It's very hard to actually do. Well, very difficult to even do this. I don't know why I'm trying, but there's a tiny angle, but that feels too dead for my liking. I'll check the slot. So now you can hear that. That's not. That just isn't. That is not. God, this is pre-compensated as well, isn't it? Yeah, it is. So you can only kind of drag them forward or back. Okay, let's tweak the. Let's make sure we've got the first fret where I want it anyway. First of all, so. And take that down a little bit. Work. Take this one down a little bit. Take the middle one down a little bit. There, I can hear it creak as it goes down. Right, so I need a bit of stretching. Now I'm sort of getting to a place where I'm aiming to, it's boiling in here, as the sun now is kind of shooting down on this side of the building, it starts to heat up. So what I'm going to do is just keep on tuning it. The way the tremolo is currently set, shouldn't be going anywhere. It's effectively hard-tailed. Let me open the door here and see if we can get some fresh air in, because it is now pretty boiling and I am sweating. Throughput of air, please. Huh. Okay, so that's fine. Let me have a close-up look at these nut slots here, because that's kind of critical to this. And I'm not 100% convinced about the condition of, or the angle of that slot, so I'm going to get a very fine file. This actually, it starts with a 9, but I'm going to use an 11 here. And what I'm going to do is, without adjusting the height, overall height, the height of the action, what I want to do is just cut backwards a little bit. And the problem with this nut in doing this is it's very, very low off the deck, so quite difficult to get it to cut. I would want, personally, just me, I would personally want a string tree, just one. I know it feels like it's like the whole thing with the, you know, I've paid for the, what do I call them, the locking tuners, the staggered ones, therefore I should expect them to do the job that they're paid to do. And in a way, yes, you're right, but that's as vibrant as that string's going to get. Ow. Yeah, magnets alert. Yeah, it's not bad, it's just a little deader than I would like personally. What are we looking for the gauge of string? Will it be something like a 13 at the most? I'm just going to do the same, make sure. I mean, I'm pretty convinced these are okay, but I'm just doing a little bit of a backwards cut in these slots just to make sure. Is that some sheep? Wow. The angle of the G in this is about, what is that? It's about 3 degrees. That's enough. Okay, let's listen to the intonation. Good. On. Ooh. That B sounding sharp on the 12th fret ping to the ping to the fret. Now it's settling on. The initial attack is sharp, quite sharp. It's on. Well, it's going to be a compromise anyway. Everything's got a bit of a sharp feel to it. If we pull this back a little bit, let's see what we get. Let's try it again. We've only got those 2 points of reference anyway, so there's not a lot we can play with. The problem with this, sorry, I'm looking totally in the wrong place. Oh, my mistake. The problem with this guitar is one thing only, really. It's that old devil called bridge, with the weirdest of weirdestnesses. Flat, nigh on flat. Let me just look at it down here and see if have I gone completely mad. Well, no, it's not. How far isn't it flat? How much not flat isn't it? Well, it's not completely dead flat, but it's not far off. It's way off. It's way out of alignment with whatever. Well, the 7.25. I mean, it's an unholy combination, really. Okay, so now the setting of the floating tremolo. This is a good old-fashioned process that I was taught by the Galeazzo Fradua method. So we tune our guitar like this. Well, get it in tune. Then we depress the G until it becomes an E. We shove whatever amount of post-it notes, in this case, is required to go under here. Because it's sitting up a little high on its legs, probably will take all of these to become an E. That's an E flat. Too many. Well, nearly. So the aim is we depress it, take one page off here, we should be on E, and we prop this up. Might be one more sheet. Prop it up so that the note is now A and E. Then we tune everything to pitch again. Now you know when we release this, it's all going to go crazy because we've got this thing, wedge of papers holding it in place. But obviously that wedge of paper is doing a very specific job, which is keeping the tail at the correct height that we want to allow, when we bend it back, it goes up by a tone and a half on the G. It's a very clever little system. Then we let go and it goes sharp. But the miracle is that we go to the back and now we can fly around there, courtesy of the true miracle of, oh look, I better zoom out, the true miracle of whatever the miracle is. Yes, true miracle of zooming things. So what you probably can't see very well, unless I prop this up like that, you probably can't see it. Even then, yoo-hoo. No, you can't see it. I'm propping it up so I can see it. So what I want is that G now become a G again. It's currently at an A. So what I do to get it to become a G is I slacken the tremolo arm screws. And as I do this, that note that started out as a G, then I depressed it to an E, propped it up, then tuned it back up with the back of the tremolo tilting up. I tuned it back to pitch with its tail kicked up, and then I let it go and everything went sharp, and now I'm dialing out these tremolo screws to retune that string and all the others, but I'm just focusing on the G string, and I'm retuning that to a G. And when that's a G, you'll notice that everything else will be in tune, and the tremolo plate is now G sharp. Tremolo plate will be kicked up the right amount, or basically back to where we had it when it was all in tune and the pink post-it notes were underneath. And that's where it will sit in equilibrium, because that's how we dialed it in. It's just a great little system. Galeazzo Fredua did it. Now, I forgot the one thing I've told everybody not to forget. Damn, do you know what? I'm gonna just realise I have literally forgotten the one thing I told everyone. Right, this is live television. Right, ignore everything I've just said. Well, not everything. There's a little stage in Galeazzo Fredua, the luthier's method that he taught us, which is, well, you know, by YouTube, which I had to work out for myself, and I still haven't got round to emailing him and kind of telling him, and it's hard to do without feeling I'm going to be critical. Okay, what I'm going to do is let us go back to where we were, right? So let's tune up. I could probably let the strings, let the claw springs a bit further out, but so let's start again. So we're basically hard-tailed. Well, we're not hard-tailed, but the spring loading, I've dialed them in so they're kind of keeping the tail of this flat, right? So I just want to tune. Okay, there's me in tune. Now, what I said, what I noticed that Galeazzo didn't notice was that when you do this setting the floating tremolo business, the end result is that the tail kicks up and you end up actually with your saddles raising up too, and they go up by about 0.5 millimeter. So what I learned over time was that a turn of half a turn on the grub screws on the individual saddles equaled half a turn, 180 equaled 0.5 millimeter. So I'm going to apply the same thing here. So I want to lower this by 0.5 mil. So I've marked the shiny end of my implement, and I'm going to now put this in and dial it in 0.5 a turn there and 0.5 a turn there. Squeak. Okay, so I've lowered it by as much as it's going to raise when I now redo the process, which I've already been through and you've already seen, but now I'm going to miraculously do it again. So just double check my tuning. Now it's a little bit too low for playing. It still plays, but I would expect quite a bit more buzzing at this end as a result. Okay, then I get my G and I depress the thing until it becomes an E, and I shove a load of post-it notes under there. I should have marked which it was, but it doesn't really matter. It's only ever going to be good for this one go. Take 2 off. There you go, that'll do for E. Then remember I said we retune. G, B, E, D, A, just run by it again just to be sure. Okay, take it out, back it goes. That's now way above A. Now remember, we do this thing again where we dial these back out until that third plane string comes down, all the way down towards being a G, where it should be. And then to what you may be able to see from there, I can't tell, as I do it, the tail end of the plate's going to kick up. And that's what it should do. And we're now going down below A, and we'll eventually get down to G. Now this method gives you a predictable standard amount of tuning down and up each time. So it's kind of given as a conventional range of a tone and a half. Well, look at that, we're just short of below G, so I'm going to do a half turn on each of these screws, tightening. Let's see. Yeah, so it will give you, right, tiny bit undone. It will give you a tone and a half on the G before you clunk on the deck. There you go, that's in. So that's where it sits, floating. It's the same range each time. So you should be able to see on the tuner, don't know if you can, that should go to B flat. Ready? Just short of B flat. Yeah, so it's a little short of what I was hoping, but that's how it's meant to work. In fact, if it's not quite enough, I'm going to go back a tiny fraction. Tiny bit more. Of course, you've got to remember you are dealing with something that's got to reach equilibrium, so you do need your tuner for this. You can't do relative harmonic tuning. Jumping out the socket with a really hard bend. Now, does that normally happen with a tusk nut? Well, I have to say, not in my experience, so that's a first. Okay, so I'm going to have to just help this on its way a little bit. Need a little bit more grip in there. Can't get anything else to jump. Well, that was unusual. pretty good. In the back of these Wilkinson thingies, you've got a little tremolo tightening grub screw. I can't remember, it's a standard size little thing. When you've got it tilted up like this in floaty mode, you can get good access to it with, if you've got the right one, which is not this one but the little American styley one, minuscule one. No, it's not that one. It must be this one. I must not be lining it up. That's right. So you can put your arm in, and then if it's got a little bit of a wiggle, you can kind of reduce the wiggle with a bit of a tighten up. Well, I say that, but this one is at its extent, so it's got a little tiny bit of wiggle, but it's nothing compared to a sort of screw in. Now the reason it's a little bit out of tune is because I didn't stretch it out, so that's the next stage. I'm going to keep the tuner on there, but here we go for the good old-fashioned tuning, stretching game. So that's the interesting bit about the setting the floating tremolo is, when John sort of said he wanted it, he didn't specify a range, so I put it to probably a little wider range than he was running on it before, but that's only because it's a sort of standard that I would do anytime somebody wants it floating, and for me it has to be defined by the range of movement or pitch increase, or pitch decreases however far you can press it before it bottoms out. But when it comes to the thing you set is the upward range. So people often think that the tremolo puts the guitar out of tune. It's the slack in the string that will be putting this guitar out of tune. So, and it will keep doing that until we get rid of all of that slack, and that really is a physical process of stretching, and you can take as long as you can be bothered to do it, and that depends on how much you want stability of tuning. But people blame the tremolo very often for it, and it isn't the case. It's very, very rare that the tremolo has a direct role in the guitar being out of tune. It's almost always the condition of the nut slots and the slack in the strings. And that slack will keep on coming out for longer than you think. Most people's idea is that you give it a few pulls and that's everything done and you're good to go. It can take you half an hour of deliberate stretching, including big bends. So we're pretty much finished on this, which is good. Like I said, the oddest thing about this, and I might, I'll suggest to John, I mean, he's an experienced player, and no doubt, it won't be news to him that these two things, well, I doubt it will be news to him that these two things are mismatched radii, but it makes quite a substantial difference when you put something like what's probably a 16, or could even be bigger, 16 radius on this piezo bridge, and you put it over the tightest known radius to man, the vintage 7.25. It's nice. There we have it. Okay, I've got some shopping to do. What an excitement! So I better go and get that little show on the road. What I'll do, as always, is I will stick the little adjustable nut hex key. I've just ordered another 20 of these and another 100 little hex hex key, no, 100 grub screws, the M2 grub screws that I use, and another 20 of these little keys. Talk about spending a chunk of money all in one go on tiny little things. It's quite ridiculous. Anyway, I found a spare black tip for this. It hasn't got one. So that is the way your tremolo should sit when you've got the correct amount of backward movement on it. Like I said, weirdness about the radius, flat radius over tight radius, not what I would ideally want, but it still plays nicely. And now we've got brand new frets in it, so a lot of life left in that neck now, and a big chunky neck. And actually, like I said at the beginning, I really love this road worn thing. I think John's done a great job of that actually. But there we go. Right, thanks for watching this one. Sorry I did a fair bit of it off grid because I was listening to football, I think was one of the things. The misery that is football. Alright, see you again soon.